Today, I'm going to give a grade to every MLB team's most expensive contract ever. This includes extensions. It's all just about the lump sum of money, and as you can probably guess, a lot of these deals are very recent. I added a who knows category for a lot of those newer deals that I can't make proper judgments on. S tier is going to be very exclusive. I have only 2 names that I think are going to end up there. We're going to go from least expensive to most expensive, so that means we're starting with, drum roll please, you guessed it, the Oakland A's, and their most expensive contract is actually third baseman Eric Chavez. Now, I don't want you to get it twisted. Eric Chavez, before this contract, was a terrific player. He was a perennial Gold Glove winner at third base. He averaged 5 WAR a season, hit 30 home runs with 100 RBIs pretty much year in and year out, and was the best player on the Oakland A's routinely. Once they signed him, though, he had only about 1 more good year, and the rest of this contract was pretty disastrous. Especially the last 3 years from 2008 to 2010, he totaled negative .6 WAR, played just 64 games, hit only 3 home runs. Recurring back problems really just hampered his ability to stay on the field. I'm going to put this contract in the D tier, not only because Chavez didn't play well for most of it, but also this kind of decided how Oakland was going to operate with these kinds of players for the foreseeable future. It didn't matter if they were good for a long time with Oakland. Once they reached the end of their service time, they were getting traded. Up next, we have the 5-year, $75 million deal for Andrew Benintendi with the Chicago White Sox. Yeah, this one kind of just had disaster written all over it. The White Sox were the worst team in MLB history last year. Benintendi was, I think, their best player, but he's averaged negative .6 WAR in his first 2 years of the contract, and he's still due to receive about $50 million of this deal, which is roughly 2/3, so there's no real end in sight. And when the contract happened, everyone kind of just shrugged their shoulders and was like, really? Benintendi was coming off a career year when he signed, and though he did have a 20-homer season last year, which tied a career high, I don't think anyone has high hopes for how this one's going to pan out. This one's going to go in the D category as well for me. It's not hampering the White Sox from being a good team. They're simply in their own way right now. There's no reason why $15 million of AAV should prevent them from making their team better. It's just not helping. The F tier is going to be reserved for some very specific contracts, and you'll see why. Third on our list is the 8-year, $106 million deal for Brian Reynolds and the Pittsburgh Pirates. This one is going to go in the C category for me. Not even too early to tell because I think we all kind of know how this one will go. It's not too expensive by Pittsburgh standards for sure, and Brian Reynolds is a good player. Before the contract, he averaged 3.4 WAR per season, played in 123 games on average, hit 19 home runs, and averaged a 128 OPS plus playing center field. Since he signed the deal, he's been roughly the same player. Still averages 3 WAR, still averages around 20 home runs, still averages around a 115 OPS plus. Now, he's going to have to move to DH at some point. He was worth a negative 13 outs above average in left field last year, which was first percentile, which is very bad. He's still due to receive $87.5 million of this deal in his age 30 through 35 seasons, which is about 82% of the contract. But I liked it for Pittsburgh's fans. They've been begging for one of their homegrown stars to get extended for a long time. This was the guy that was acquired in the McCutchen deal, so it made it that much more impactful. And I think Brian Reynolds' bat still has a lot left in it. It's just he's not really the needle mover that's going to make them a playoff contender. They need more around him, and I'm just not sure that Pittsburgh is going to do that. Up next is the extension for Jose Ramirez and the Cleveland Guardians, 7 years, $141 million. This is going in my S tier. I think this is maybe the best contract in baseball right now. Before signing the contract, Ramirez averaged 5.3 WAR per season. He was a 26-homer bat, a 3-time Silver Slugger, and averaged a 135 OPS plus while playing great defense at third base. Since he signed the contract, he's gotten even better. He's stayed on the field more. He averages more WAR. He's now averaging 6.0 WAR from 2022 to 2024. He has a 140 OPS plus on average, and the team has made the playoffs in 2 of the 3 years since he signed. He's still due to receive $88 million on this deal, which is roughly 70% in his age 32 through 35 seasons, but this is a massive discount for the caliber of player that Jose Ramirez is. Simply put, he's the best third baseman in the game, and he's getting paid like he's not even the best player on his team. This is firmly S tier for me based on value of the player and what that player is getting paid, which is very far apart right now. Up next is the 5-year deal that Paul Goldschmidt signed with the St. Louis Cardinals that took him from his 2020 season to his 2024 season. And I'm actually going to put this one in the B tier. I think this one leaves a bad impression because of Goldie's kind of off last year in 2024, but throughout this contract, he was as advertised. Excluding 2020, from 2021 to 2024, he averaged 4.6 WAR, about 28 home runs, and a 133 OPS plus he won the National League MVP award in 2022. In his best years of the contract, which were 2020 to 2022, St. Louis made the playoffs in all of those years. They just happened to lose in the first round every time. In In the duration of this contract, he was 5th among first basemen in home runs and RBIs, and he was 3rd among first basemen in FWAR at 18.2. At an average annual value of only $26 million, I think this contract was well worth it for St. Louis. Up next is the 6-year, $150 million free agent deal that George Springer signed with the Toronto Blue Jays, and this one has not aged as well, and we're still in the middle of it. Springer's pre-contract averages were awesome. He was an everyday center fielder who averaged 4.7 WAR per season, hit about 28 home runs per season, and had an OPS that was 31% better than league average. Since then, those averages have dipped sadly. He's averaging 2.5 WAR, playing far less games because he hasn't been able to stay on the field, not getting that same power output. We're coming at the tail end of this contract though. He's now only owed $48.5 million in the last 2 seasons, which is about 1/3 of the contract. And now we're starting to see what we all kind of expected, which was more injuries for Springer and him likely moving off of the outfield. The troublesome part is that those injuries also came in the front half of the contract. He suffered multiple quad strains and ankle sprains in the first 2 years of the deal, and of course that really ugly injury in the 2022 wildcard series against the Mariners. At the time, I think a lot of people liked this deal, and in the aftermath, it kind of aged pretty poorly, and is one of the contributing reasons why Toronto maybe didn't win more in their big window. I think I'm going to put this one in the C tier because when he was on the field, he wasn't a bad player, but that was the big thing. He was never really healthy for them, and when he was producing at an okay level, just not the level that he was producing at with the Houston Astros. Up next is the initial 7-year extension that Jose Altuve signed with the Houston Astros, not the newest one that he signed last year, so we're judging the years from 2018 to 2024, which means this was a very good deal for the Astros. Altuve averaged 3.5 WAR, averaged 120 games played, hit about 21 home runs per year, and won 3 Silver Sluggers throughout this contract. And while his pre-contract averages were better, 4.5 WAR, more games played, and of course the 2017 AL MVP, I still think Houston is really happy with keeping their team leader around and basically the face of their franchise throughout the entirety of his career. And because they were able to keep him around on this extension that wasn't too expensive, he's now 3rd in WAR, doubles, and 2nd in batting average in Houston's history, as well as 4th in home runs. So he's made himself an Astros icon. Plus, of course, they won another World Series, and Altuve was a big part of that. So for me, this one's going to go firmly in the A tier. I think winning a World Series is a huge bonus, especially when that player was one of the best players on the team when it happened, and that is certainly the case for Jose Altuve. Well, we're finally here, folks. It's our first F tier, and it is Chris Davis and the Baltimore Orioles, one of the most notorious contracts in baseball history, one that will continue to plague the Orioles a decade from now. Before the contract was signed, Chris Davis averaged 3.7 WAR per season. He averaged 40 home runs per season. He, of course, led the league in home runs twice, had a top 3 MVP finish. He was one of the most feared hitters in baseball. But once that contract was signed, he completely devolved. From 2016 to 2020, he averaged negative 0.5 WAR per season, averaged 107 games per season, and just a meager 80 OPS plus. The worst part about this deal and why it lands in F tier is because Davis will still collect deferred payments from the Orioles for a long time after his release. He's still due $9 million next year, $3.5 million for the next 7 years after that, and then $1.4 million for the next 5 years after that. Chris Davis is going to get paid until he's 51 years old. And his decline was a huge contributing reason why the Orioles went full rebuild mode and basically were the laughingstock of MLB for 5 years. I got nothing against the guy, but his contract firmly goes in the F tier for me. Before I tell you guys about the next contract, I got to thank Pickett for sponsoring today's video. It's the end of the year, and Pickett's here to tell us how we did all year long with our sports betting. Every year they release a Spotify wrapped version of their metrics called Pickett Instant Replay. Instant Replay analyzes all your bets and automatically turns them into a summary of how you did on the year, what bets you won the most on, how many bets you missed on just by one leg, all that good stuff. If you feel like getting your own Instant Replay for the year, download the Pickett app now and use promo code JOHNBOY when you do. You'll get $3 or $100 sent directly to your Venmo or PayPal when you sign up with our promo code. Scan the QR code on the screen or go to pikkit.com today. And thank you to Pickett for sponsoring today's video. Let's cleanse our palate with a much better contract, which is Buster Posey's 8-year deal worth $167 million with the San Francisco Giants. And this one is going to go in my A tier. Posey was coming off a career year when he signed the deal. He had just won the 2012 National League MVP award, leading MLB in WAR, batting average, and OPS plus, and he stayed the same caliber of player throughout this deal. He averaged 4 WAR a season, played 133 games a season, which for a catcher is really good, and averaged a 124 OPS OPS plus throughout this contract. He played 100 plus games in every year of the deal and was only below a league average OPS plus one time, which was in 2019. The Giants made the playoffs 3 times throughout the duration of this contract, most notably winning the World Series in 2014. He became one of the most iconic San Francisco Giants in their franchise history, got his 3rd ring, and went out on top with a spectacular retirement season in 2021. Well, up next is the 11-year, $182 million contract that the Rays signed for Wander Franco, and that's going to go in F tier. And there's not much else to say about that. I think we all know what happened, and yeah, that contract's not good. So it's going to go down there. Wiping our hands clean of that, we're going to move on to Jason Heyward's 8-year free agent deal with the Chicago Cubs worth $184 million. This contract is really bad, no other way to put it, but it's not going to go in F tier for the sole reason that they won the 2016 World Series in his first year. So for that, it'll go in D tier. As many of you know, during the rain delay in Game 7, Heyward gave this impassioned clubhouse speech to the Cubs. They came out with their hair on fire. They won the game in extra innings, snapped the drought. I think for that speech alone, many Cubs fans would agree that speech was worth $184 million. If we want to do the whole numbers deal, before the contract was signed, he averaged 5 WAR a season from 2010 to 2015, averaged a 114 OPS plus throughout that time span, was a great defender in center field. The contract kind of made sense, though I think at the time everyone felt like it was a bit of an overpay. He was coming off an all-time year for him, his highest WAR in a season, 6.9 WAR with the St. Louis Cardinals in 2015. And it actually took him 4 seasons with the Cubs to even amount to that 1 season with the Cardinals in terms of WAR. Never playing more than 150 games in any season with Chicago. So yeah, this contract was straight up bad, and it would be an F if not for that 2016 speech, and I maintain that. Up next is the 7-year extension that Christian Yelich signed with the Milwaukee Brewers worth $188.5 million, and this one's just kind of a bummer. Yelich was coming off a pair of monster seasons, one of which when he won the NL MVP award. From 2018 to 2019, he averaged 7 WAR, 40 homers, a 171 OPS plus, and at the time, this was viewed like an absolute steal in terms of the average annual value. It's just ever since, Yelich hasn't been able to stay on the field. He's still due to receive a little less than half of the contract in terms of money, which is $88 million, so the Brewers aren't exactly close to getting off the hook. And since signing the deal, he's averaged 2 WAR per season with a 117 OPS plus, which is still solid, just a far cry from what he was. So unfortunately, I really like Christian Yelich as a player, but I don't see any way I can put this any higher than the C tier in terms of the money that's tied up with the Brewers, their unwillingness to spend in the first place, and the fact that Yelich is already on the decline and they didn't even get great years out of him in the front half of the contract. Up next is the 6-year deal that Carlos Correa signed with the Minnesota Twins worth $200 million, and I'm going to put this one in who knows, because who knows? Correa was a really solid Minnesota Twin in his first year there. Then he opted out and we had that whole contract snafu. He was going to get $350 million from the Giants, then $325 million from the Mets, and then both those deals fell through because of ankle concerns, and now he's back with the Minnesota Twins. The Twins are protected pretty well in this contract with a lot of vesting options in the last 4 years based on plate appearances, which I think really helps them out. And when Correa was on the field last year, he was awesome. It's just the fact that they played only a little over half of the games, which has to be a little concerning as a Twins fan. If Correa can stay on the field, I have a good feeling about this contract, but who knows? Up next is maybe the weirdest deal on this entire list, which is Zack Greinke's 6-year contract worth $206.5 million with the Arizona Diamondbacks. The reason it's weird is because in my opinion, Greinke was never bad with the Diamondbacks. He just was never as great as he was before it. In his 3 years in LA prior, he averaged 6 WAR a season, pitched 200 innings on average, and maintained a 156 ERA plus cumulatively, including winning the ERA title in one of the most contentious NL Cy Young races ever in 2015. With Arizona in this 4-year stretch, he averaged 4 WAR a season, was a 3.40 ERA mark with a 131 ERA plus, which is exactly what Arizona needed at the time. They needed a bona fide ace. He helped them snap a 6-year postseason drought, bringing them to the wildcard game in 2017, and Arizona kind of traded him at the perfect time when they sent him to the Houston Astros in 2019, because once he left, he only averaged 1.2 WAR a season, only averaged about 100 innings, and just wasn't as good as he was as a Diamondback. The thing is, the trade package wasn't great. They didn't really get anything out of it, and the Diamondbacks post Greinke had some really bad teams. So the fact that they got pretty good value out of him and then traded him at the perfect time and snapped a postseason drought makes me put this in B, which feels weird because I don't think a lot of people remember Zack Greinke's Diamondbacks era. But all in all, the 3.5 years that they got were not bad by any means. Up next is Austin Riley's 10-year, $212 million extension with the Atlanta Braves, and as you can probably guess, this one is going to go in who knows. I think Riley is one of the best hitters in baseball. I think last year was a blip due to injury, but last year was a bit of a down step. Had they not signed Riley to this extension, 2025 would have been maybe his last year as an Atlanta Brave before hitting free agency. The Braves have made the playoffs every year that Riley has been on the team, and he's been one of the most important hitters in the lineup. The only two things that worry me is that his defense has never been great. He's been worth negative outs above average at third base every year except 2023 when he was worth 0. Plus, the Braves still owe him the majority of this contract. It's backloaded. Still, they're going to get Riley's prime years, and he's demonstrated that he can be the best hitter in a very good Braves lineup. So I'm going to put it in who knows because it can go up or it can go down. Up next, we have Joey Votto's 10-year, $225 million extension signed in 2014 with the Cincinnati Reds, and I really like this deal. Before the contract was signed, Votto averaged 5.7 WAR per season and a 156 OPS plus, and when the contract was signed, he was still a 3 WAR player on average with a 135 OPS plus, elite numbers for a first baseman. He was the face of the Reds franchise. He had multiple top 3 MVP finishes from 2015 to 2017. Pretty much everything you can ask for a mega deal, because what we think of when we sign a mega deal is, are we going to win a World Series? And we're signing it for a good first half and hoping that we get something in the back half. And you definitely got something in the back half. Votto had some really good years in his mid to late 30s. The only unfortunate thing is that when he signed, the Reds never made the playoffs in a full season again. I don't think Votto prevented them from doing that, but they didn't properly supplement talent around him to get it done. So for that reason, he's going to go in B tier. I think in terms of value, the Reds got exactly what they needed. They had a franchise icon stay with the team for the entirety of his career. It just would have really helped if they had at least one deep playoff run. Up next is the 8-year, $260 million extension that Nolan Arenado signed with the Colorado Rockies. This one is just a disastrous mess. In fairness to Nolan Arenado, I'm not putting this one in F tier. I'm going to put it in D tier because Arenado stayed a great player. He just didn't stay with the Rockies. His lone full season in this contract with the Rockies in 2019 was fantastic, and throughout the contract, he's averaged 4.2 WAR and a 120 OPS plus, playing magnificent defense at third base. The Rockies traded him just 2 years in, still paid $90 million worth of this contract, got a terrible trade package for his talents, and then ended up signing Chris Bryant anyway for around the same money. You guys have heard this song and dance before, so Nolan Arenado is going to go in the D tier through absolutely no fault of his own, purely through the fault of the Rockies. Up next is Robinson Cano's 10-year free agent contract worth $240 million with the Seattle Mariners, and I have mixed feelings about this deal. Before the contract was signed, Robinson Cano was point blank the best second baseman in baseball. He averaged 7.3 WAR per year from 2010 to 2014, averaging 160 games played throughout those years with 29 home runs on average and a 142 cumulative OPS plus. When he got to Seattle, he stayed a pretty productive player. He averaged 4.7 WAR, which is down, but still really good, with an average of a 129 OPS plus and 21 home runs per year from 2014 to 2018. As we all know now, hitters are really afraid of playing in Seattle, so the fact that Cano came in on this big deal and still got the job done alongside the likes of Nelson Cruz and brought this team multiple winning seasons makes me think this contract wasn't exactly a failure. Cano never had a sub 3 WAR season with the Mariners at all, and then they traded him for a top prospect in Jared Kelenic, which is a trade that certainly should have gone their way. He was traded with $96 million still owed to him, and Seattle only ended up paying $12.5 million after 2018, so they got off of this contract and basically benefited from the front half of it alone. I came to its defense a lot here. I think I'm still going to put it in the C tier because Seattle never made the playoffs, and Cano's legacy is a little bit tainted with steroid stuff, and they probably could have spent that money elsewhere and produced a better team out of it, but I don't think Cano was a bad Seattle Mariner, and I think Mariners fans can agree with that. If it makes you feel any better, if you disagree with me, this is one of the most uneasy placements I have on this list. Up next is Steven Strasburg's 7-year extension signed in 2020 worth over $200 million, and this one is just an absolute bummer. Strasburg really earned that $245 million when he sold his soul for the 2019 World Series, throwing a Herculean amount of innings to help the Nationals capture their first title. From 2012 to 2019, his pre-contract averages were 3.6 WAR per year, 28 games started per year, and a cumulative 3.21 ERA, which are fantastic numbers. His totals in the contract altogether were negative 0.5 WAR, just 8 games started, and a 6.89 ERA. Strasburg was in an active 7-year deal, and then after the World Series, he opted out, and the Nationals basically had to choose between him and Anthony Rendon, so they were screwed either way. $35 million as the AAV was the largest sign for any pitcher in MLB history at the time, and then Strasburg quickly went down with nerve issues, shoulder inflammation, and eventually thoracic outlet syndrome, ending his career in 2024. Through no fault of his own, this contract fully set back the Nationals for years, and it's going to go in F tier because of the aftermath, the ugly relationship that exists between Strasburg and the Nationals now, and the fact that they could have used that money to make the team better after 2019, not knowing what was going to happen to Steven Strasburg, like all of us. It's unfortunate that it unfolded the way that it did. Up next is the second 8-year contract that Miguel Cabrera signed with the Detroit Tigers, this one worth over $200 million. And yeah, I hate to be so negative, but this is another member of the F tier. If we were judging the first 8-year contract, that might go in S tier because Detroit got everything they could have asked for from Miguel Cabrera from 2008 to 2015. In this window, he averaged 5.8 WAR, 34 home runs per season, and a cumulative 162 OPS plus. He was a 2-time MVP winner. He won the 2012 Triple Crown, 4 batting titles, 6 All-Star nods, basically one of the best contracts signed ever. And then they doubled down and gave him another 8 years, and it set the franchise back a decade. In the 8-year extension, he averaged 0.3 WAR per season, averaged only 107 games per season, and an OPS plus of 106. He had to move from third base to first base and basically clogged up that power position for years on end. And throughout the duration of the latter extension, Detroit never made the playoffs, and entering this year had the longest playoff drought in baseball. Detroit has finally escaped it, and as you can see, they're much better off for it now, but that still exists in the F tier for me. That was a really bad financial decision by the Tigers. Sticking in the AL Central, we have the 11-year extension worth $288 million signed for Bobby Witt Jr. and the Kansas City Royals. This one I really want to put in A tier because I believe that Bobby Witt Jr. can be the best player in baseball in a year's time, but we're going to put it in who knows out of fairness to the other newer deals. In his first year of this contract, he finished runner-up in AL MVP voting with the most valuable season in Royals history by WAR at 9.4. He also set the single season record in their franchise history for extra base hits and total bases while playing shortstop. Kansas City designed the contract to be backloaded, so they're only paying him $7.7 million next year, $13 million the year after that, so they have time to put some money and invest around him and open this window for themselves. I think we all know that Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be a star, but I guess we all need to see a little bit more before we can justly put this in the A tier. Well, speaking of shortstops and the A tier, up next is Corey Seager's 10-year free agent contract worth $325 million with the Texas Rangers, and that is going to go in the A tier for me. It's hard to give it anything less than an A when Texas won the World Series, mostly because of Corey Seager. So far in the 3 years of this contract, he's averaged 5.2 wins above replacement per season with a 143 OPS plus on average while playing shortstop every day. Texas needed a star badly with Adrian Beltre's retirement and a shortstop badly with Elvis Andrus' decline and then departure, and Corey Seager was a perfect fit. Seager hit 6 home runs on their 2023 playoff run and won the World Series MVP. He's still owed about a little over half of the contract in terms of money, which is $189 million, but the front half has gone ridiculously well. If they get anything on the back half, this might be S tier. He set career highs for himself in WAR, home runs, RBIs, batting average, and OPS at age 29 in 2023. I think most Texas fans would have paid $325 million for that 2023 season alone when he finished runner-up in MVP voting. This is a clear A-tier pick for me. Up next is the same value, $325 million, but a 13-year contract signed between the Giancarlo Stanton and the Miami Marlins, and this one is just weird. At the time, this was the most lucrative contract signed by anybody in any sport in history. Before the contract was signed, Stanton averaged 4.3 WAR per season with the Marlins and a 144 OPS plus cumulatively, and then when the contract was signed in the first 3 years with Miami, he actually got better. He averaged more WAR with a higher OPS plus and more home runs on average, and of course won the 2017 NL MVP award by hitting 59 home runs with a 7.9 WAR season. And then Miami kind of traded him at the perfect time. They traded him at peak value, got rid of basically all the money that they owed to him, and got some pieces back from the Yankees. So in the end, Miami only paid him a little over $30 million for those 3 great years, and the Yankees got saddled with the other $200 million that's been owed to him over the past 7 years, where he's compiled just 9 WAR. So this one's going to go in C tier for me because it was kind of a giant waste of time for Marlins fans, a big middle finger to them when they ended up trading him and not investing around him and blowing up the core that probably could have competed with him, Christian Yelich, Marcell Ozuna, JT Realmuto, all that stuff. It was just an ugly time for the Marlins franchise, and he was the face of it. Up next is Bryce Harper's 13-year deal worth $330 million with the Philadelphia Phillies. This one is going to go in A tier. It should go in S. There's only one thing missing, and that's a World Series ring. Before Harper got to Philly, he averaged 4 WAR a season and a 139 OPS plus per year. From 2012 to 2018 with the Nationals, he's been basically the same player with the Phillies. He's been as advertised, averaging 3.9 WAR per season with a 149 OPS plus. Health is a little bit of a concern, but when Harper's on the field, he's the best player on the Phillies and leads the charge. He helped snap their decade-long playoff drought, and now they've made the playoffs 3 straight years from 2022 to 2024. He won the 2021 NL MVP, and he's transitioned from the outfield to first base seamlessly, opening up more options for the Phillies. And like I said before, the only thing he really hasn't done has been winning a World Series in a Phillies uniform. Up next is the 11-year extension signed between Rafael Devers and the Boston Red Sox worth $331 million, and this one is going to go in who knows because it's still pretty new. I will say I like the optics of this deal a lot less than the other ones that are in who knows tier. Devers is a poor defensive third baseman. The Red Sox are also already trying to move him to first base reportedly. We all know what his bat is capable of over the past 2 years since he signed. He's averaged 31 home runs and a 132 OPS plus. He's homered 25 times or more in each of his last 5 full seasons, so that bat is certainly capable, but Boston could have used that money to keep and sign Mookie Betts, who went to the Dodgers and then signed for $360 million, which is only $34 million more. In my opinion, Betts is someone that profiles a lot better long-term than Rafael Devers, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because that bat is one of the best in the American League. So I'm going to put it in who knows tier for now. If he ends up playing a great defensive first base, this could be a great looking contract for Boston, but who knows? Up next is Francisco Lindor's 10-year deal worth $341 million with the New York Mets, and I'm going to put this one in B tier. The reason he doesn't go in who knows is because he's now been with the team for 4 years, and we actually have a pretty decent sample size to judge. His full season averages from 2016 to 2019 with Cleveland were 5.7 wins above replacement per year with a 118 OPS plus cumulatively. He's been roughly the same player with the Mets. He's averaged 5.4 WAR per year with a 122 OPS plus. He's finished top 10 in MVP voting 3 years in a row and has led the Mets to their deepest playoff run in 10 years this past season. The Mets will pay a static AAV of $34.1 million throughout the contract, and Lindor profiles pretty well for the back half. He's still 99th percentile in outs above average at shortstop at age 30, so that should bode well for the back half. For me to move him any higher, this 5th year has to be spectacular, and at some point the Mets have to win a World Series, so for now he's going to live in B tier, and I think that's fine. Up next is the new 11-year extension signed between Manny Machado and the San Diego Padres worth $350 million. This one's going to go in who knows, but I gotta say, I don't love the optics of this deal. I did love the initial 10-year contract that was signed in 2019, which was worth $300 million when Manny Machado and Bryce Harper were the 2 big free agents. $30 million per year of average annual value was great for Manny Machado. He was a power-hitting third baseman who had a decent glove and could be a team leader. Before he signed this new extension, his averages from 2019 to 2023 were 31 home runs and a 123 OPS plus. Now, the start of this contract is at his age 30 season. It's going to take us all the way to his age 40 season when he's already begun his athletic decline. He's 15th percentile in sprint speed as of this past year and 39th percentile in outs above average with a -1 value. It doesn't bode well for the rest of this deal. So I will say, against my better judgment, I'm going to put this in who knows, because if I had my way, I think it would go in C tier. Up next is Aaron Judge's 9-year, $360 million deal that was signed last year with the New York Yankees, and normally this would go in who knows because of how new it is, but Aaron Judge is kind of a transcendent player. This one's going to be an automatic A tier for me. Like Bryce Harper, the only thing missing is a World Series ring. In the 2 years since he's signed, he's averaged 7.6 WAR per season, he's averaged a 204 OPS plus, and by the way, he still plays center field every day for the Yankees. That being said, he'll likely need to move out of center field sooner rather than later because he doesn't profile well there defensively, but he just won the 2024 MVP award unanimously when Bobby Witt Jr. had a great season alongside him, and he's already top 10 in Yankees history for wins above replacement and home runs. He's going to be an all-time great player. We're down to our last 2 contracts, which both reside in Los Angeles, and the first one is Mike Trout and the Los Angeles Angels. Trout signed a 12-year, $426.5 million extension with the Angels, and while he remains committed to the team and committed to winning, it's getting hard to defend this one. The first year of the contract was a dream come true, a 7.9 WAR season, a 181 OPS plus, 45 home runs, and of course the AL MVP award. Since that season, he's averaged 64 games played per year, just 2.8 WAR per year, and while the bat is still there, Trout just can't seem to stay on the field. He's owed $37.1 million annually from age 29 to age 38 from 2021 to 2030, and he hasn't been on the field pretty much for any of the recent years. The Angels haven't made the playoffs since 2014, the longest drought in baseball. They already lost Shohei Ohtani, so they're back at square one, and they're trying to invest money into this team, but they're very clearly hampered by this deal. It feels weird judging Mike Trout this way. I'm going to put him in C tier. I think in terms of what we know now, Trout has become an injury-prone player, and in terms of the price tag attached to him, it's going to be hampering the Angels for a long time. Last but not least, the 10-year, $700 million free agent deal signed between Shohei Ohtani and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Through and through, this is an S-tier contract. As most of you know, the Dodgers are only going to pay $20 million to Ohtani the next 10 years because most of this contract is deferred money. Ohtani's going to get $68 million annually in his 40s, likely when he is retired from the game, but while he's with the Dodgers in his prime, they'll be able to spend money elsewhere and bring in more stars to the team. In 1 year alone, the Dodgers won a World Series. Ohtani posted the first 50 homer, 50 stolen base season ever, won the unanimous MVP, and he got to play alongside Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, and now we all know what that looks like. Plus, he's going to start pitching again next year. In my brain, there's no way this can go anywhere else other than the S tier, and that's where it'll end. And that is every team's most expensive contract graded. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys disagree with me, let me know, because I spent a lot of time deliberating over this and arguing with myself and my coworkers. But honestly, I think we landed in a pretty okay spot.